Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, and you can listen to us every Thursday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live here on the Inception Radio Network. So I have just a couple of little announcements to make. I mean, we are entering the month of May, and I have a couple of really cool events coming up. On May 18th, I will be in Granbury, Texas at the Granbury Paranormal Expo. Actually, my good friend Dennis Baltheiser is going to be there, and I'm not going to tell the story, but it has to do with the poodle in a tinfoil hat. He hates it. So it'll be fun. So you can check that out. Granbury, Texas, May 18th. And then if you're in the Dallas area, I'm doing a book signing at the Barnes & Noble on 15th Avenue in Plano. So that should be cool. Doing a little presentation first and then the book signing. You get to hang out, look at books, buy books. That's always a good thing. Let's see. And as always, if you miss an episode of Just Energy Radio, you can always go to our website, www.justenergyradio.com. Check out the archives. While you're there, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter to keep you informed of all the shows that are coming up. You can like Just Energy Radio on Facebook, and that'll keep you informed of upcoming guests. And you can always listen to our archives on our YouTube channel, Just Energy Radio, or you can come here to the Inception Radio Network and download the show off the site. Or one of my personal favorites is that you can get the little Inception Radio Network app for your smartphone, so you can like listen at work, listen in your car, listen while you're taking a shower to my show like over and over and over again. Now, that's the best thing. Actually, one of the things my husband's been doing is he'll put a show on, but then he has a timer and he'll start playing it at night while we're trying to go to bed. So I don't know. Maybe that's why I've been having weird dreams, you know, like little weird conspiracy things going on in my mind because we're listening to programming. It could happen. Anyway, so we have two great guests on today. In the first hour, we're going to be talking about megalithic civilizations in the UK, primarily about Newgrange, but some of the other sites there. And in the second hour, we're going to be talking about ancient civilizations in America. Did you know we had like really old stuff here? Who'd have thunk? Anyway, so in the first hour, we're going to be talking to my good friend James Swagger about his book, The Newgrange Sirius Mystery. So let me tell you a little bit about him and get him on the air. Initially, James Swagger, a trained system analyst, sought out the megalithic monuments of Western Europe in his spare time traveling around the UK, Ireland, and Denmark. His embrace of a multidisciplinary approach to the research of megalithic sites and the larger view of Passage Grave Cosmology produced his first book, The Newgrange Sirius Mystery, linking Passage Grave Cosmology to Dogon Symbology. And his website is www.justenergyradio.com. jamesswagger.com. And then he has a different one because he has his own radio show, which is Capricorn Radio. And we'll get a little information about that in a bit. And that website is www.capricornradio.com, which is not here on the Inception Radio Network, but could be. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, James Swaggart. Hey, James, how are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Rita. Thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, well, thanks for coming on the show. How are things over on the other side of the world these days?
Yeah, I go between the UK and Ireland. You hesitated there.
Well, that's why I just said the other side of the world.
Sure. It's good. It's good. We're having a bit of a summertime and a bit of sunshine of late, so that's really, really good. Yeah, and I've been traveling a little bit too. So I came back from Malta and it was pretty bad weather. So I just jumped on a plane again and went to Peru, so I'm back now for my sins to sit tight here for a few months and do some writing and research and finish off my latest book. So yeah, things are good and I'm happy and I'm bouncing and teeming with life at the moment. So,
but that's good. More people should have that bouncing and teeming with life energy versus, go to work every day and wish you were bouncing and teeming with life instead.
Sure. Well, my work now consists of writing. I am getting offers to go back onto oil rigs and wind farms and well-paid, high-tech engineering jobs, but I don't want to be a slave to the engineering and science trade anymore. I want to be sitting writing books and following my dream and doing research and bringing my skill set to the table, Dr. Rita. So I get to do that every day, and I have a sea view at the very top of Ireland here, which is in the UK, top of Ireland, Northern Ireland. So I get to sit and write every day, and I'll jump in the car and I'll go and see some megalithic sites and top up my research. And it's a nice little life I have. It's just not lucrative in terms of finances, but
it's rich
okay.
in other ways. It's very rich in other ways.
Exactly, and it's very rewarding, and I'm very happy the way things have gone. I couldn't have asked for my research to come better, and I have a couple of little finds. They're not major, but it's nice when you find things that aren't out there, Rita, that people haven't touched upon before, or if they have touched upon, they haven't grasped the concept. And I guess that my first book, I should say, the Newgrange Sirius Mystery, there's some of my stuff in there, there's some of other people's in there, and then there's some of my interpretation of other people's work too, and I guess I kind of wanted to compile like a Passage Grave Cosmology, the megalithic tombs. I took one in particular called the Passage Grave, and I compiled a cosmology, the best concepts that were out there, some mine, some new, and kind of just to raise awareness, and so it was nice to do that, and I did have a little bit of a look to finding some rock art that really wasn't written about, documented, or and that's in the book too, so it's these little finds that spurs me on, Rita, and I say, well, look, if I hadn't have come and done this, and okay, I do have an engineering and a astronomy background, I have 2 degrees and 2 masters, and I have a good skill set to bring to the table. I'm just so happy to be using it and following a passion at the same time, I feel very privileged and very lucky. But it's nice when you get something that's, you're not just churning out old material, I never wanted to do that. It's kind of why it got me started,
Well, and that was going to be my question. What got you started into, this whole area of study? Because it's not obviously what most people, all right, like you and me and most of the people we know, but, but for the regular people on the planet, it's not something that they just jump into and get interested in, researching and studying things like megalithic sites. So
sure.
What got you started in this whole thing?
It's kind of a twofold aspect to that, Rita. Megalithic stuff's on my back door here, Rita, so I always went and seen it. But I always looked at the stones and I went, okay, there's a pile of stones there. They're in various formations of standing stones, stone rows, stone circles, megalithic tombs. They're 5,000 years old, so you're going to go and have a goof off it if it's on your back door, and I did anyway. I appreciate ancient civilizations. Ancient civilizations was always something that is dear to me, and I'm an avid reader as well, and but it's not the civilization that I wanted to research or write about. The Babylonians, the Akkadians, and I actually had wrote for a historical histories magazine in Ireland, and it was for a favour, and somebody wanted an engineering eye on some of the astronomy and the technologies that ancient cultures had, and I did articles and some mysteries too that I was a little out of my depth. And when I in my late 20s wanted to compile all those articles and put them in a book, and that book is still half finished and on the shelf because I went off on tangents. But alongside that, I had always looked at the megalithic civilization all my career. I mean, I've been to very, very remote places, and you have to understand the terrain in the UK and Ireland, that these things, these megalithic tombs, these monuments are in remote places. There is big ones like Stonehenge on the motorway and, not far off London, and it gets the press basically, yeah. But there's other ones in hills in the middle of nowhere in Wales and Scotland and very remote places. And I had the pleasure of being on a remote island, the Outer Hebrides, off the north of Scotland. And I remember getting off the plane. It was minus 13 in October, and I was there for 3 months. And the average wind speed was like 40 miles an hour or something. We even lost the roof of the house we rented and had to go and stay somewhere else, because of the wind getting battered. This is how rough this place is like. And it holds one of the best monuments that Britain has to offer. That's Callanish Stone Temple. And it holds a lot of secrets, Callanish Stone Temple. And it's very sophisticated. But so few people go to this, Rita. And I had the pleasure of being there for my career. And I realised, let's go and see these places. So I always thought these were silent monuments. We can't know anything about them. And having the pleasure to go to all these places, in my spare time as an engineer and a physicist, I'm sitting there feeling privileged. Okay, it's a personal thing to me. It's a hobby. I like to go and see and try and figure something out. And I found out about archaeoastronomy, and I realized I can be applying my skill set to these. And so initially I was going to write one chapter for my historical mysteries book, and it was going to be on the megalithic civilization. It was going to be very short-lived, and it didn't turn out to be that way. It just the book took a life of its own, and I seen errors in people's work. I seen stuff not compiled properly, and I brought my take to the table. And I also found that rock art, that really was I wouldn't even call it a decipherment. For me, it's not a decipherment. I've seen rock art as plain as day of the two constellations of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And this is extremely important because it's so readily recognizable. There's no decipherment needed. Yes, you have to understand what the concept of what they were doing with the constellation. Yes. But, somebody had deciphered this and copyrighted it and did it wrong. And I have that in the book, and people are welcome to check that out and look at it. But, it's one of the most immediately recognizable constellations. That's Ursa Major, and the seafarers use it for navigating to find the North Star in the Northern Hemisphere.
And that's like the Big and Little Dipper for us Americans that are not so smart.
The Big and Little Dipper, you got the big saucepan, the little saucepan, and the reason I actually quite like the big saucepan and the little saucepan because it actually looks like the handle of a saucepan, one with the handle up and the other one with the handle bent down. That's how you distinguish the two of them. Obviously, they're different physical sizes too. But yeah, many names. The technical names, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor. And I realized there was a notch on the top of this stone, and that these two constellations flip 6 months apart exactly at the time when this stone was built in 3200 BC. Now, how you know that? You need astronomy programs to wind them back. Anybody can do this. Archaeoastronomy is it can be an armchair researcher's dream, because you can just wind back the stars, put in the GPS coordinates of these sites, and do it yourself at home, And I provided that in the book. I provided the GPS coordinates of all these sites, and I wanted a good data research book, and that's kind of where it started off. And I ended up getting more into mystery and finding links to the Dogon tribe and, their rock art, and I've since found out more, and that's going to be in the sequel, and it became alive, this whole megalithic civilization to me. And my own second book, my sequel, is going into the acoustics, and it's these stones are starting to speak now, Dr. Rita.
Talking to you, huh?
They're talking to me, yeah.
They're talking to you. So I want to kind of get into some meat because I love meat, not the potatoes so much, just the meat part. But what we're going to be really talking about are the passage graves. We're not going to be really talk about Stonehenge. We're not going to talk about the standing stones, which I think most people are more familiar with when they think about megalithic structures in the UK. We're going to be talking about, these quote unquote passage tombs. And so could you explain what a passage tomb is?
Yes. Now, I should just firstly say the reason I concentrated on passage tombs is because the ones in Ireland possess an awful lot of rock art. Noth Passage Tomb in County Meath, just north of Dublin, possesses 25% of the whole of the rock art in Europe alone, just on that one monument.
Wow.
So this is extremely important, because we have art to help us understand what these guys are doing. So it's a natural line of inquiry to start at the most readily available information. So some of the other passage tombs are lacking rock art. So that's why I kind of concentrated on the passage tombs first and foremost, Rita. So a passage tomb is one type of megalithic tomb. You have various types called wedge tombs, court cairns, dolmens, and passage tombs is basically one specific design, and it's for all intents and purposes a chambered mound, a big heaped pile of stone and rock or soil or all three, done in layers with a corbel vaulted chamber in the center. Off the chamber in the center, there's typically recesses in the shape of a cruciform shape, one to the left, one to the right, and one to the back. And a passageway feeds this chamber. So if you can build that picture there. Again, the most famous one in the world, arguably, could be also Godbrinus, but Newgrange, what I would suggest, would probably be the most famous passage tomb in the world. Mostly for its spectacular display of light that enters it. But equally, there are ones in Scotland too. There's Maze How that take in these solar alignments. And it's basically like a sun dagger. I mean, a sun would penetrate through a special, in the case of Newgrange, a special light box. And the passageway meanders slightly into the chamber. And it also slightly ascends as well. So that because it ascends to the chamber, it meets the sunbeam coming above your head. The two of them meet at a point inside the chamber. Very cleverly done. And also because the passageway meanders left and right, it blocks the light from the doorway. So, very sophisticated engineering. I mean, you're looking at an architectural layout, unprecedented, at the time, it's like these are very sophisticated monuments, and you're looking at mathematics, astronomy, logistics, engineering, to build these things. These guys weren't slow off the mark,
You've been talking about astronomy and celestial connections with these different sites. And one of the things I've always wondered, and since I have you, and it sounds like you would know the answer to this,
Sure.
They talk about, and I've seen shows where they talk about Newgrange, and, it's the summer solstice and the sun's coming in and there's a little spiral carving and it lines up on the center of the spiral carving. But wouldn't that, because of the progression of the cycle, wouldn't it change the day when it was going to cross the center of that circle? Or do you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, first of all, when you're talking stars, you got the precession of the equinox, and it's a 26,000 year. It's a 26,000 year cycle, but that doesn't affect the sun. That affects the stars. You have another one called the obliquity of the ecliptic, and it's a 40,000 year cycle, and that would change the tilt of the Earth. And as it changes the tilt of the Earth, anything built on the Earth would be slightly kicked out. So Newgrange is slightly out of alignment, but I mean, not very much for 5,200 years. I mean, it must have been built with sheer accuracy,
I know, but what about leap year and changing the calendar? And,
Yeah, well, you also got to understand that the summer solstice and the winter solstice, it shifts every year anyway. It's typically the 21st of December, but it changes every year anyway. Because you got a variety of reasons, the Earth's trajectory around the sun it's not exactly, it's like it changes by seconds. every year, like, you know. So, and you got the obliquity of the ecliptic too that affects things. That's over a long cycle. But yes, I mean, the leap year is accounted for anyway. Like, so I know what you're saying, but no, that doesn't affect the alignment of the sun. Pretty much, the sun's sitting bang on, pretty much where it was 5,200 years ago when Newgrange was built.
But it impacts the stars. See, I never really even thought about that. There was a difference.
Yeah, the obliquity of the ecliptic would affect the star as well, but it's so insignificant. It's the precession of the equinoxes is the daddy. It's the one that really kind of is noticeable over long periods of time. Whereas, as I say, the obliquity of the ecliptic, it's not very much like, you know, I mean, the sunbeam still, I mean, I should just say, like, I mean, in feet, the sun penetrates nearly 60 foot, maybe more, 65 feet. And to do that is extremely accurate, to get it to go in that far. And to get it to go in at a straight line and then ascend the passage to meet it at an angle and stuff, like, you know. So you're not talking just light coming in a doorway or light coming in and going in a few feet. You know, it literally goes in like a thin beam. So, you know, that thin beam doesn't, it's not hitting the back chamber anymore. It's slightly off, like, but I mean, like I say, it's had 5,200 years to be affected.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that when we start looking at these ancient sites, that there is a consistency among them to really take into account things that are going on in the sky. That today, you know, if you can get somebody to put up a building that has good feng shui, you're lucky, you know, and they still think you're nuts, much less going, well, you know, I needed to have the morning light come in my front windows on the summer solstice. They think you're a kook.
Yeah, you know, I actually have other issues with the acoustics. I mean, I actually quite accept that. But I come from an astronomy background. I can see that, you know, the astronomy in 3000 BC, 4000 BC, some of these monuments go back a lot further, Rita. You're looking at the ones in the west of Ireland, probably maybe 5000 BC, and the ones in Sligo, it's got like 5,000 archaeological sites just in Sligo city, like, alone, and surrounding territory. You know, Ireland is riddled with this stuff, like, you know, and I've only concentrated on these passage graves, but, you know, when I've looked at the passage graves and I've looked at the cosmology that these guys were breaking down, the sun, the moon, and the sun's quite easy, like, you know, but they broke it into the four obvious points of the year: spring, autumn, summer, and winter. Shortest days, longest days, days of equal night. And they also broke that further down again, as if that wasn't enough, and they had 8 points of the year. And we've just had May Day yesterday, which is known as Beltane, the old pagan festival. That's actually a cross-quarter point, Rita. That's in between spring and summer, these two special days. You know, it's an old pagan calendar, and it comes from the megalithic builders, where they broke down, you know. We also have another one called Lunasim. We still, in Northern Ireland, have fairs that it's called the Old Lammas Fair in Antrim, and it's celebrated on Lunacy Day. And you also have Halloween. Its origins is in this special day, Samhain we call it, which was originally about the 3rd of November, but it's been shifted to 31st through a Christian thing, Hallows Eve. So this breaking down the solar cycle, you can understand that into a certain degree. I can pretty much get that. With a calendar building with that's what I explore in the book, and that's somewhat open to interpretation. The moon now is very, very complex in its motions, and it repeats every 18.6 years, and you've got lunar standstills, minor and major, and, you know, and you got the declination that it orbits around the equator, and, you know, in northern latitudes it can appear to go from very high to very low, and, you know, so its motion is somewhat erratic, like, and these guys had this figured out too, like, you know, 2 lunar months. They had the sidereal lunar month and the synodic lunar month. So these guys were, like, you know, hammering out this cosmology, like, to a good standard, if you want to call it that. When you get to the stars, like, I mean, I have no problem with that either, because this was their theater. This is what I'm trying to get at, Rita. This was their theater of the day. Like, they had nothing to amuse themselves with. This was like exploring their intellect, and they did it by, like, noticing long cycles. Now, if you could picture a standing row of stones and you aligned it to a star, You give that 72 years, that's shifted 1 degree because of precession. Give it another 72 years, it's out on 2 degrees. Give it another 72 years, it's out 3 degrees. 3 degrees is pretty noticeable, like. And your stone row is not going to be aligned anymore. So this civilization was in effect for over like a long period of time. Like they literally lasted maybe 1,500, 2,000 years. It's open to suggestion that anyway. So, you know, they had enough time in their civilization to notice things falling out of alignment. So you don't need the 26,000 years of precession to notice this, Rita. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm getting at, like, you know. So, I mean, a century
but
or two.
But it still would take multiple generations in order to track it.
Not only that, it would probably take multiple generations just to build Newgrange. Because I'm not too sure about this, you know, and archaeologists are pretty adamant that these guys only live 25 to 30 years old. And they reckon the engineers and the physicists and scientists, they all look at Newgrange and they went, that took at least 50 years to build. And
it only took 20 years to build the pyramids. Come on. That's not nearly as complicated.
I know. Well, that's not to do with the physical, actual labor, Rita. That's to do with the marking out of the sun on the horizon. How you would actually find the shortest day of the year is you would watch it rise on the horizon to your far left, and then you'd watch it rise on the horizon to your far right. And then the spring and autumn equinox would be in the middle. So you would find these two extreme points and put like markers on the horizon. And you'd have to do this every year. But then you're prone to weather as well. So what if it was raining on the day of the shortest day of the year? So, you know, you would need at least 50 years just to mark the site out and get it right and get this beam to penetrate and lay it all out in terms of logistics. Like, so that's what I'm saying, you know. That's not even counting dragging the physical labor. That's just extra man hours that people just add up, like, you know. They just
there and do the research, basically.
Yeah, yes. So, and then when you understand that the life expectancy of the time was 25 to 30 years old, that really bakes your noodle at that point, because you're going to go, that's like 2-3 generations, you know.
But what if you go with dating that is in, you know, biblical texts, or, you know, life expectancies that are documented in other cultures that give people lifetimes that are 500 years in length, 900 years in length, or more? Then it would be, hey, we did it over the summer almost.
Sure. It would maybe explain why these monuments were in effect for so long periods of time. Like, I mean, there was a change in style too as well. It's almost like I call it a megalithic devolution.
Tell me about that. So,
yeah,
what did it change from to? And which one was earlier?
Well, I mean, when you look at the megalithic tombs, I mean, you've got what you call the later styles seem to be somewhat, you know, lacking in. They're made out of stones. A lot of the ones that are older are more complex. They have more astronomy. They're more sophisticated, and the other ones, like, it's hard to say, because like the court cairns, I don't think look very. They look like they've lost the run of themselves, and they don't really know what they were building anymore. You know, I see so much more sophistication in the astronomy and the acoustics of the older monuments, and it's like there's a devolution process going on in terms of style, architecture, and the knowledge incorporated into them. Because, you know, Newgrange is the most complex megalithic site in the world. It's got so much going on in it. And when I talk about that, I mean, like, the Boyne Valley where it's situated, there's like 40 passage graves all within a tight corner of the Boyne Valley. The Boyne is the river. And Noth has something like 20 baby mounds around it. And the baby mounds are 60 feet in diameter. So they're not really babies, like. But it's compared to the big mound of Noth, it's got the longest passageways in Europe. So, and these things are very sophisticated, but the later ones seem smaller stones, no rock art, you know. It seemed like to be like a community function to them, where they're using them like, as I say, the court cairns, where some people think the priests were given ceremonies there, and they were like a village hall. Then they turned like from a university into a village hall, if you want to call them that.
But were they ever graves? You know, I mean, that's the kind of basic theory, is that they were the tomb for someone. Although I have heard that they were, like, in legend they were like giants' homes, or I don't know, there was some connection to giants with them too.
Sure. Well, yes, there is cremated bones found inside these monuments. They weren't cremated inside; they were cremated outside, and the bones and the ashes were brought inside and put in ceremonial bowls. There's various sites across Ireland and many other parts that have the remains found there. So yes, they were tombs in that respect. But they were also teaching platforms. They were like a Stone Age university, a Neolithic university, if you want to call it that. And not just for astronomy, for acoustics as well. I mean, to incorporate so much advancements. I think this is just like, the advancements of their day. But I still think they had research going on, Rita. I think they didn't have it all figured out. I mean, they didn't just build these monuments and said, look what we can do. There's the moon cycle, there's the sun cycle, there's some stars and constellations. They had elements they weren't sure about. And that's what I go into in the book, that, they were still trying to explore and push the boundaries of what they could do with observational astronomy. And, when you look at that and when you get your head around the astronomy that's going on, you understand that these guys, you have to raise them up many levels of what you're taught in school. And when you get into the acoustics, this is what I have trouble with, because I can understand how they could watch the stars over long periods of time, whether they lived longer periods or whether they passed knowledge on and they observed the heavens and the monuments, like gave up surprises and they fell out of alignment and they understood there was another cycle called precession, and maybe they explored that. But the acoustics is just as advanced. I mean, when you look at the chambers, Rita, a lot of people think they were healing themselves with sound, and from what I've looked into, I feel that too. I see evidence of deliberate acoustic design. I'll give you an example of that. The recesses I talk about in off the main chamber, a lot of them have like what they call a sill stone. It's basically a slab of rock, like a little wall you have to get over to get into the room, and it's got there's floor sills and there's other sills to get in, and it's basically like a little aperture. You have to climb through this little aperture, and the effect of that is it's like a bass box, if you want to call it that. It's like if you think about a hole in a guitar box, in the box of a guitar, there's a small aperture and a big box, a big room inside it. So when you go into these monuments, they resonate at the male vocal range. I've measured several out myself out in Sligo recently, because there hadn't been any research done on those acoustically or measured. Other ones people have measured Newgrange. I've been over to the Hypogeme in Malta. The temples in Malta, I must say, are called temples, but they're just the same function as the Passage Graves and Megalithic tombs of Ireland. They're riddled with spirals. They got the same ceremonial bowls. They got the same alignments. And they also have the Hypogeme over there. They also have like concave rooms in these temples that have like an acoustic design as well. It's like they were able to focus sound. And these rooms with these bass boxes, the Hypogeme is exactly the same. All these rooms that are inside rooms in the Hypogeme, it resonates at the male vocal range. They even told you how to make it operate. They put this little niche into the wall so that when you chant into it at 97 kilohertz, if you're a male, the whole chamber resonates, vibrates, and
wow.
People think they were syncing the hemispheres of the brain, how they got that knowledge. That's the key. That's the thing that really gets me, because you can understand astronomy because you can see it. Observational astronomy, the Mayans did it as well. They looked over long periods of time and they noted everything. And if you note things and you keep records, then you're going to notice changes. And when you notice changes, you're going to look for causes. When you look for causes, you're going to find out more principles. And then the circle of knowledge and truth starts again, and you refeed the system. But the acoustics, that really gets me, and it's measurable, it's there. Even a lot of the rock art is indicative of acoustics, altered states of consciousness.
It seems like there are a lot of people that are coming forward with talking about the acoustic properties of a lot of other sites, or the, vibrational properties of other sites. I've had a number of people on where we're talking about, tunnels underneath, the pyramids, or the pyramids in Bosnia, or, these other subterranean kind of locations where they talk about that there is this healing quality, that people will go in and come out feeling better or lighter or whatever was bothering them isn't bothering them as much as it had been before. And I'm wondering if, I don't know what the ground is like, in the UK, and if, having tunnels below ground is something that you can do, but could it be that these were above ground, they made the mound so that they could make a tunnel to go into it to emulate that same kind of a property?
Sure, most definitely. I do think, that on the outside, they brought the sunbeam in, and it comes in on one day of the year for Newgrange, but other ones open up to the sunset, ones to the sunrise on the shortest day of the year. And, so there is that element, but the rock art is indicative of the astronomy. So outside, yes, the sunbeam goes in, and the outside is indicative of astronomy and calculations, but inside they have this acoustics function, and perhaps they built themselves a chamber, a sound chamber. So they're not like chambered mounds to me. They're like sound chambers, like experimental, a sound chamber that you can sit in. You can do experiments in the physics lab with sound chambers, but they're quite small. You can't sit inside them. But to these guys, they were building, sound chambers. And yes, I was having a conversation with somebody last week, no less, and they reckon, they could have even had they have these zigzag sine waves at some of the rock art, at Fornox Passage Grave in particular, in County Meath, just north of Dublin. And people would say, I was talking to somebody, and he was saying, and I said, is there a way? And he said, yeah, well, if you had like an incense or a smoke, that you could fill the chamber, and you would have standing waves set up inside where the sound couldn't escape. So it would set up like a vibrational wave, and it would break the smoke particles, and you would see sine waves basically in the air, because you would be inside. You would be, well, yeah. It's that's not even an outlandish thing. This could be why they actually even. They may have built one. I try and logically figure this out, and I'm like, maybe they built one and they put these chambers in and then realized that their design was doing this weird thing, Maybe there was an accidental discovery process, because that's the best way to find and accept something. Look for the accidental discovery, because that explains away, this knowledge of high science, so it's a natural thing to explore first. But there is roots for that, yes, and it's not that outlandish. You got to think about it. They had a big, giant sound chamber that they were sitting inside. So they were sitting inside the experiment, basically. People also say, they would know blockages in the body, they would almost have like a sonar if they were inside the sound chamber, But
there are a lot of people today that put their faith in sound therapy. I have a girlfriend, Dakara, who's been on the show a number of times, and she always makes me laugh because she does toning, and and when she does it, it's one really loud, and it kind of makes you jump. But I can just visualize her standing in that chamber and just having the entire enclosure vibrate. Because she makes the room vibrate even just in a regular, in your regular house. Hey, let me ask you this. So do you think it's based on the shape, or is there a part of it that has to do with the stones? We know like in the King's Chamber, it's all made out of granite and that has all crystalline properties. So do we find those same kind of crystalline properties in the stones that are used to build the inside of these chambers? Sure.
Well, I'll go back to the Great Pyramid and the shape of the stones there, and indeed Stonehenge is very similar too. But physically, the shape and layout of the chambers are most definitely. I see it and I understand the physics of it. Basically, a sound wave goes into the recess, the chamber, and comes back out again. And as it comes back out again, it's obviously redirected. It coalesces with another one, and these coalescing of waves, you get peaks in the amplitude and you get cancellations. So, this is how the standing wave gets set up. It's quite a basic thing. It's not really complex science to understand it if you knew the basics physics of sound waves. So, yes, most definitely I see the layout of these chambers. There are other ones with 5 recesses. So they may have been exploring different layouts, internal layouts. I've even been to a cave system not far from Passage Graves in Sligo, and the internal layout of the caves are actually the same as the internal layout of the passage graves. So maybe there was like a natural cave system that had recesses to the left, right, and back. So, you know, it most definitely for that element of the passage graves and the acoustics, yes, the internal layout. There's a lot of quartz at Newgrange as well. It now sits on a modern wall that was the reconstructions in the 1970s. But the crystalline structure of the passage graves, I have a different theory on that. It's to do with fertility and sunlight basically rotating more magnetically. Because I'm going into sunspot cycles of that. That's in my next book, Rita. It's a whole other entity.
Well, you know you'll be back on, so we can talk about it then.
But going back to the Great Pyramid, you know, I've had great, fantastic Chris Dunn on the show, my own podcast as well, and I talked to him in length about the acoustics, and fascinating discussion, as you can probably tell with my own research. And, you know, yeah, so I mean, they are actually deliberately flattened on one side and roughly hewn on the other, and they're basically tuned to vibrational frequencies. And yes, the crystalline quartz of the stones would be affected with that. Like, yes, so inside the Great Pyramid, yes. Also in Stonehenge, you know, and that's featured in the book as well. Like, because it's not just about passage graves in the sequel. I have gone into worldwide acoustics. And indeed, the Great Pyramid as well. But I am concentrating on the main body of text as passage graves. But so the
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I'm just
maybe I should put them on air.
The Stonehenge internal horseshoe shape ring basically is like a parabolic mirror, and it focuses sound. And similarly, like the Great Pyramid, they're flattened on one side and roughly hewn on the other. So there's the deliberate shaping of the rock and the deliberate choosing of the rock as well. So yes, the answer to your question is yes for the Stonehenge and Great Pyramid, but inside the chambers, the quartz is on the outside basically. And inside the chambers, there's no particular crystalline rock inside.
Okay. All right, so I'm looking at the clock. We have 20 minutes. I have a question from the chat room that I want to ask you, but I want to ask you this one first, but now it just totally left my mind. Okay, so I'll just ask their question, and then I'll come back
to
my question. See, now that's going to bug me because I've been thinking about this question all week. Okay, so this is from One World Watcher, and it says, James, with the research you have done, because you mentioned Dogon, the Dogon tribe and their rituals and habits, are you convinced that they truly are from a far-off planet, or do you believe this is more legend passed down through time?
Sure. No, yeah, I subscribe to the Nummo as being otherworldly star ancestors. I mean, you've got legends and Celtic tales of. I was talking to a lady tonight there, and she enlightened me to some rock art, and I got talking about this very issue. Very informative lady, and basically they talk about the Tuatha De Danann breaking into the Fomorians. These are two groups of people with Celtic names. Tuatha De Danann basically means other race of people, and the Fomorians had a force field that the Tuatha De Danann were able to breach. So, like, this reads like science fiction fairy tales, like, you know. But yes, I totally subscribe to the Dogon's teachers, not necessarily the Dogon's teachers, the Nummo being from otherworldly, these semi-aquatic fish beings. I've also had Shannon Doherty on the show, and I've read her 3 books. I've also had Laird Scranton on, and I've researched the Dogon quite heavily, like. And I do think the Dogon are one of the most important cultures because they're a source knowledge for going back to ancient times that are still alive today, and they have knowledge. I mean, I think that basically a lot of the science and technology that's incorporated into these passage graves came from, you know, either otherworldly or high-tech culture that we're the Nummo, whichever you want to subscribe to them. Not something I've wrote about heavily in the Newgrange Sirius Mystery. I cleverly avoided that because I wanted it to be just about astronomy, but I am going into that in my sequel. And I mean, with Laird Scranton's work, you know, and he talks about matter and waves and scientific know-how that really the Dogon shouldn't possess. Like, and there's a Dogon stroke Egyptian hieroglyph that he talks about. It's like 3 water waves, We have that at the Passage Graves too. It's like a Dogon symbol. It's an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph, and it's there as well. And I do think they understood matter and waves, because don't forget, sound is a wave and so is light. Light is electromagnetic. They're both just two forms of matter and waves. So yeah, there's a scientific know-how that I have something like 15 points of commonality with the Dogon. Some of their artwork and symbology, but also some of the scientific symbology symbols that Laird would talk about.
And I have Laird scheduled to come on next quarter.
Oh, awesome.
I love Laird.
He's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy. He's been very helpful. He's done a book review for me too, and a very nice book review.
Here, I'm going to give myself a little plug. And I'm going to be doing a book signing in Albany, New York on June 22nd. And Laird's going to be there.
Yeah, that's
just a little secret. He's going to be there. We're going to be hanging out.
That's his hometown, yeah.
Yep. For
sure. So, yeah, I have a lot of respect for Laird's work. And it's helped me a great deal understanding because I didn't expect to find a Dogon thing. That was just like a treasure trove, and that was basically through one symbol. Well, the spiral is everywhere. It pops up in all these different cultures, and the Dogon had that. And I talk about that a lady called Teresa Vergani, a Portuguese academic researcher who's done a lovely research paper called Ethnomathematics of the Dogon. And basically analyzes the mathematical structures and of their symbology, the spiral. And, they also have this thing called the Dogon sun wheel, which basically looks like a wagon wheel or a cart wheel. This spokes with a center and an outer rim with 8 spokes, basically. That's what it would symbolically look like. And it pops up in Malta too on pottery, So nobody seems to want to talk about all these different passage graves across Western Europe. The problem being that not all of them have art. So, but I find the spiral pops up in Malta, and so does the Dogon sun wheel. They have this ceremonial bowl. I see specific circumstantial evidence popping up here, there, and everywhere. And there's no doubt that the same civilization built all this. The Maltese don't like to. They reckon it's a local phenomenon, and they won't hear anything else. Even though, by their own admission, they have red ochre used to paint spirals in the Hypogeum. And the Hypogeum is like a temple as well. It's the same people who built the Hypogeum built the temples. And there's no source of red ochre anywhere. Mm-hmm. And there's no source of red ochre on Sardinia either, where they say that the people came from to build it. And sure, just by default alone, and then they went somewhere else, but they don't want to talk about that. It's like they reckon. Yeah, and it's a shame because, they actually put a picture of Newgrange up there and a picture of the Pleiades, and it doesn't mean anything because they just put it up there to shut people up and stop asking questions. And when people just people goof off the picture, and I asked him, and he was like, "Oh, there's some links to that, but we can't prove it anymore. We can't know about it." And that really pisses me off sometimes, when archaeologists say we can't know about the past unless we dig up the past, and that's not true. We have archaeoacoustics and we have archaeoastronomy, and the archaeologists are losing out. They really should be getting involved, but there's but
it makes them look stupid. When you have some basic thing I'll just use your example. They're painting with red ochre. They claim they don't have any connection to anybody else, but where did they get the ochre? Hello? They make it in some lab somewhere. I mean, it just is hello, just you have a degree. Can't you use a little common sense in there?
Yeah, common sense is out a lot of time in archaeology. It's good archaeologists too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Michael O'Kelly, who's done who unveiled the astronomical alignment of Newgrange, the sun, with the sunbeam and that. There is good archaeologists out there, but for the best part, you feel like you want to shake half of them and just wake them up, give them a good shake and go, come on, please, work with me here. But there is this kind of arrogance that, we need to dig it out of the ground. And it's the Egyptologists are even worse again. They're their own special breed, Mm-hmm. And just on the acoustics of ancient Egypt, I'd spoke to Gary Evans a bit about that too. And, I know Gary, and there's a lot more people talking about acoustics now.
All over the place. I mean, Michael Tellinger too.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, he reckons these stones ring. I haven't. We should get Michael on my show. I should do. It's just I have a long list of people to get through, and I'm storming through them. But yeah, I'm very interested in Michael's work, and I haven't got around to it. But I'm like that. I wait till I can do it well before I will do it. But yeah, I mean, there's so many people getting involved in the acoustics. Even when I was at Malta, Rita, I met a guy. He's into acoustics and with healing, and he actually had his own crystal bowls made to a certain frequency of 432 hertz, and he lives on his name's Stefano, so if you're listening, Stefano, greetings. But he lives on a reservoir. He manages this reservoir dam, and he goes out and plays these crystal bowls on the dam, and they echo like with a 5-second echo all around the dam. And he just lives there on his own, like, you know, he manages it 2 weeks on, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, like. And I just happened to meet this guy at the equinox, the spring equinox on Malta, at one of these temples, and I was stunned because I just think but it's a small niche, weird discipline subject that nobody's really into, and there's people every time I talk to somebody they're into acoustics, like, you know, and it's like, and healing, and it really is catching on, and people are, it's not just in terms of the archaeology, the archaeoacoustics, I mean just in terms of modern day natural healing, like, you know, it's a lot of totally fascinating though, Rita, you know.
Okay, so here's my question that I think you would get it, and maybe something you haven't looked at or thought about, but I'm just going to throw it out there. So could it be, you know, or is it possible that these sites like Newgrange or even the Standing Stones were actually designed to be some kind of a what we would see as an electrical component, you know, like a capacitor or some kind of frequency modulator that was actually built using earth materials to do whatever? You know,
sure.
I don't know what they would use it for, you know, because we haven't found their blenders and their cappuccino machines or anything. But could they actually, I mean, like, what got me on this whole thought was that I had Maria Wheatley on, and she was talking about the, you know, them going out and doing dowsing around some of the Standing Stone sites, and there were these, you know, lines that were crisscrossing, which reminded me of like energy stuff. And, you know, and I was like, well, you know, if you have these stones there, then, you know, maybe it is just modulating them and they move them around so that they get the right frequency that they want. And then I was thinking, you know, and the way they built some of these passage graves with layer upon layer, you know, could they actually be some kind of giant capacitor? I mean, is it possible? Has anybody ever looked at it from that perspective?
Sure, I know exactly what you're saying, you know, and I know you have in Mexico, you have the mica incorporated into some of the structures there.
Exactly.
And I know that with the Great Pyramid that, you know, the crystalline content was specifically chosen for, you know, it's like if you squeeze piezoelectric crystal, it gives you a charge, and if you apply a charge, it expands with pressure, like, you know, and vice versa, like, you know. So yeah, I mean, the crystalline content is the key. But I know personally from my own research that the passage graves that are riddled with, like, you know, quartz, but it was for a different reason, and it was to do with, I mean, just in my sequel that I'm writing now, I'm still uncovering evidence, you know, and I have to kind of cut it off at some point. I don't need to have like every little piece of evidence. I have to stop at some point. It's still coming into me, like, but, you know, basically 3113 BC is when the Mayans started their calendar, and that was due to a sunspot minimum. It's also coincides with the time that Newgrange was built. Newgrange is
there is a whole bunch of stuff that all started right at that same time. A bunch of stuff all over the world.
Exactly. And Newgrange is no different. Now, here's the thing. Sunspot minimums affect melatonin, which affects fertility. You've got this weird fertility aspect to Newgrange as well. And note, they have male and female stones. They call them the squatter stones and phallic stones. They got phallic objects all over the place. They were obsessed with fertility, had major fertility problems. But here's the thing. When you put the sunbeam in and it bounces off the quartz, it changes the electromagnetic light and makes it more magnetic. How they knew that, Rita, You know, and there's other reasons for understanding this. It wasn't just that the sunspot minimum coincided. I mean, you have like the amount of curbstones count up to a sunspot cycle number, and there's lozenges and rock art to basically add up to sunspot cycle theories of 7 days plus 7 days minus and the magnetic reversal of the sun. So these were sun worshipping civilizations, like. You know?
But it also means that they had to have a high enough level of consciousness to even think about a solar minimum. I mean,
sure.
Like I'm going to be thinking about a solar minimum. And, I mean, there are, in my own research, you read these books and it's like, well, back then they really didn't even know where babies came from.
Sure.
And it's like, come on. Okay, so I'm just letting you know you have one more minute, and then we're going to get into like where people can get your book and your show and blah blah blah.
Okay, well I'll just wrap it up. I've got a bipolar mindset, and I try to always think about two sides of the coin, if you want to call it that. Yeah, and I'm trying to think, did somebody give them the knowledge, or were they smart enough to do it themselves? But I think the facts of the matter is probably both. They had a higher level of awareness that maybe they got through hallucinogenic brews. They got from like acoustically going into altered states of consciousness. Maybe they synchronized the hemispheres of their brain and became more balanced and they're more intellectual. But there's also the element that I think if the Dogon were there, and the Dogons, I should say the Dogon's teachers, the Nummo, if they had an element or a hand at play, then they were also teaching them. They were giving them the knowledge, like. So I think it's a multi-functional aspect. I don't think it's just as simple as people being clever. I think they were given some of the knowledge, and they are also shown how to be more clever, shown how to sync the brain, like. Cool. Which the Egyptians did as well. Like they were into syncing the hemispheres of the brain and the pineal gland. So
they were smarter than us. But we have
clever.
McDonald's and Starbucks, so it's all good. It balances out. It balances. James, if they want to get a copy of actually spend like a second talking about your radio show and then where they can get your book, and then we got to go to break.
Sure. My own radio show is called Capricorn Radio, and the website is capricornradio.com. Go there, you'll hit the Facebook page and the YouTube channel, and all the shows are archived. I've got some very interesting guests, a lot of you on your show too, Rita. My book is available on Amazon US and Amazon UK, the Newgrange Sirius Mystery. And if you want a signed copy, I post worldwide. You can go to my website for the book, newgrangecosmology.com. And my author's page is jamesswagger.com, which hosts all my activities and work.
Okay, well, I think the music's going to come up, but I cannot hear it. So, James, thank you very much for coming on the show, and I will talk to you soon, and we will definitely have you back on because this was a great conversation, but I'll give you 2 hours next time. Anyway.
Sure. Well, you'll have an interesting book, and I know that's your field of work and healing and stuff like that, Rita. So, yeah, I'll get you a copy of the book. It should be out summertime, so all being well.
Okay,
but thanks for having me on the show, Rita.
All right, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
All right, and we'll be back with Rick Osmond after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.